By forming that biblical worldview, we can make sense of the world, and we can better understand how to live within that world according to what types of beings we are, what types of creatures we are, and what it is that we were designed for. What is that purpose that we were designed to have? Hi, welcome to Elysian Ends. Today we're going to be answering the question, what is this thing called a worldview? A worldview is a philosophy. It's an overarching explanation of the way things are. It refers to the cluster of beliefs that a person holds about the most significant issues of life, such as God and the cosmos, knowledge, values, humanity, and history. A Christian worldview is a Christian philosophy alternative to all of the other philosophies in a pluralistic culture. So what does that mean? Well, a Christian worldview is an alternative worldview inside of a culture that many times believes or claims that there are many roads to truth. And what we can actually know and what we do know about reality. One of my professors, Kenneth Samples, in his book, A World of Difference, defines worldview like this. He says, in more technical terms, a worldview forms a mental structure. It organizes one's basic or ultimate beliefs. This framework supplies a comprehensive view of what a person considers real, true, rational, good, valuable, and beautiful. Another philosopher and theologian, Norman Geisler, defined worldview this way. He said that a worldview is a way of viewing or interpreting all of reality. It is an interpretive framework through which or by which one makes sense out of all the data of life and the world. Ultimately, it's a story of reality, and thus it is the means by which we begin making sense of the reality that we find ourselves in. It's the starting point for how we approach the big questions in life. And the reality is, and the truth of the matter is that everybody has a worldview. It's unavoidable. Now, I've mentioned this word philosophy, and in order to properly understand what it means when we're talking about worldview and how philosophy comes into play, we're going to need to define a few terms here and start off with a few terms that are more familiar to those who are into philosophy. And maybe you've taken a philosophy class, maybe you enjoy reading philosophy, so some of this may be review, but within philosophy, first, understand that when we talk about the word philosophy and philosophy as a practice, philosophy is really the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. Within philosophy, there's two main branches. And so those two main branches are metaphysics and epistemology. Metaphysics is really that study of ultimate reality. It's asking the question of what is really real. The questions like, what does it mean to be a person versus what does it mean to be a cat, or what does it mean to be a dog? Metaphysics also addresses some of the more deeper questions in life, some of the more debated ideas, things like what is the nature of free will? How do we make choices in life? Or is it that we actually have the ability to choose freely, or is there some other causal agent or causal factor out there that necessarily determines everything that we do? Also, topics like the nature of time. What is time? The nature of the mind. Does the mind really exist, or is it just simply something that is a physical component of our brain? And there's many other things within metaphysics that covers. The other thing that we talked about was epistemology. And epistemology is the study of knowledge. It's how do we come to know things, and what is it possible for us to know? And these two things are vitally important in forming a worldview. Now, I don't want this to be intimidating for some of you who are watching out there. This may be very elementary. You've studied philosophy for years, and this may be something that you know offhand. But for many others, so for example, if my mom is watching this, for many others, some of those words may not be something that they use in everyday language. But there's an analogy that a good friend of mine, Tim Stratton at Free Thinking Ministries, uses when he talks about these things, and I think it's applicable here. He uses this idea of the swimming pool. And he talks about when he was a kid going to the swimming pool and seeing, the big kids in the swimming pool doing backflips and gainers and jumping off the high dive. And yeah, he was in the kiddie pool over to the side. Now, he get comfortable in the kiddie pool, but he always knew where the adults were or where the big kids were in case he ran into something that he needed their assistance with. Philosophy, and for Christians, philosophy for the everyday Christian, that analogy is very similar. The Christians don't need to feel like they have to be over jumping off the high dive and doing backflips in the deep end of philosophy. But every Christian should be comfortable in the shallow waters of philosophy and maybe swimming in that kiddie pool, as Dr. Stratton commonly refers to it. So don't let this be intimidating. Now, as we begin to talk about philosophy and specifically how we tie this back to the Bible, it's important to note that, the Bible is not a book about philosophy. It's a book about a story. It's about God's story. It's God's story about himself and who he is, and about us, and about what he wants with us, what our part is in this world that he has created. However, in the Bible, there is a philosophy that is embedded inside the Bible. It's this underlying explanation of reality and what is real and how we know what is real based on the type of creation that we are. Furthermore, the Bible contains a love of wisdom. And so philosophy is a very important component to forming a biblical worldview. Now, when it comes to metaphysics, that branch of philosophy that deals with the ultimate reality behind the things we see and experience every day, it's important to understand that the Bible contains a metaphysic. There's this view and perspective behind and about the reality that we find ourselves in. The Bible contains a Christian metaphysic that contains the true story of reality to tell us as we look out through our eyes and experience our everyday lives what it is and how it is we are to engage with the lives that we live and how we are to interpret the world around us for what it truly is. Next is that branch of philosophy, epistemology, that pertains to knowledge and how we can know things and what it is that we can know. This is going to get into questions like, is there evidence for the existence of God? And so as you can see, asking questions, is there evidence for the existence of God? And can we even know that God exists? And what is reality? And what is the fundamental fabric of reality that we find ourselves in, that we experience? These two questions come into play as to our starting points as how we think about worldview and how we even begin to interpret that world around us. What is true and how can we know what is true? But before we can even get to these questions of can we know what is real, and again, that's a question of epistemology, we have to first have a true understanding of what it is that we are. What does it mean that we can even ask questions about reality and ask questions like, why is something the way it is, and ought it be that way? And so you can see there's these two things around metaphysics and epistemology that are key in forming that biblical worldview. And ultimately, as we'll dive into and as we'll look at, and ultimately it is the Bible that provides that satisfactory answer to these questions. It's the Bible that provides an answer in a satisfactory way where we can begin to actually make sense of reality and understand what this world is and what this reality is that we find ourselves in. And so by forming that biblical worldview, we can make sense of the world and we can better understand how to live within that world according to what types of beings we are, what types of creatures we are, and what it is that we were designed for. What is that purpose that we were designed to have?